Hello, my name is Diane, and today I want to do a mid-year check-in, not quite the mid-year freak-out tag. I want to talk about the bookish goals that I set at the beginning of the year, check in on how I'm doing with those, and how I'm going to carry them into the second half of the year. Also talk about my favorite books that I've read this year, some disappointments, some surprises, some new releases, things like that in the second half. So let's get into my goals and see how I'm doing. My first goal was to read 52 books. I have already done this. I'm pretty pleased with that because I've also liked the majority of the things I've read. I'm not just piling in quantity. I'm getting some pretty good quality out of it, and I'm very happy about that, of course. I'm not going to increase this. I never increase my reading goal because I just want to be able to read whatever I want for the rest of the year and not be trying to hit a higher number if I don't feel like it or want to. My second goal was to finish series when I start them. I had quite a few ongoing series at the beginning of the year, the end of last year, and I worked very hard at the beginning of the year to finish up all those series. I think I've done a very good job at this. I only have, excluding series that the sequels aren't released yet, I think I only have 3 or 4 series that I'm currently reading. I think 3 series, and they're just not ones that I'm very concerned about. 1 or 2 of them I might not even finish. But as far as series that I really want to finish and actually want to see through to the end, I'm pretty much caught up on everything at this point, which feels really good. Don't have to worry too much when I pick up the first book in a long series. If, oh no, I'm just going to add another one to my ongoing series. I don't really have to think about that anymore, which is really nice. My next goal is to read my physical TBR. And that was my plan last month, was to make my whole TBR was just my owned books that I haven't read yet. I didn't read a single one. I haven't done any yet. My physical TBR is honestly not that big. It's not very intimidating. They're all books I'm really interested in, but because they're just on my shelves and I can read them whenever, and most of my other books I read from the library, so I just have to read them when they're available. I don't really prioritize the books that I own. It is still always at the forefront of my mind when I'm putting together my monthly TBRs, when I'm deciding what to pick up next. So I have not done well at all at this. I read my first own book last month, and it was also my first nonfiction of the year. So this one needs a little bit more attention going into the second half of the year. My next goal is to be more reasonable with my reading plans. I don't think I've done this, but I feel like I'm more reasonable in my expectations if I don't meet my reading plans. I definitely still would rather have a larger TBR, maybe an unreasonably large TBR going into each month, to have just a smaller list of books that I want to focus on, books that I want to make my priority and get to soon. But if I change my mind and just mood read through the month like I did last month, I don't feel bad about it as long as I'm reading books that I'm enjoying and I'm interested in. I think I'm much more reasonable with taking the pressure off of, I set my TBR, I didn't read anything off of it, but I don't feel bad about it. So kind of more reasonable, not really. I am still trying to figure out what a reasonable number of books to read in a month. So maybe one day I can just have a very small TBR, actually read those books, but still have the room to mood read and pick up random things that I hear about when I feel like it. We're getting there. And my last goal was to interact more with the book community. I have done this to some degree. I don't really know what my end goal for how much interaction is enough, but I'm much more comfortable just responding to people or commenting to people if I feel like on someone's video or post or on Discord or something says something. I'm much more comfortable responding or chiming in if I feel like I have something to say, but I'm also not going to just leave a comment that's completely meaningless if I don't really have anything to add to the conversation. I'm just not that type of person to just speak without having something I feel adds something. And I have been trying to, I never like YouTube videos, and I don't know why. I watch them and then I move on. So I'm pretty good about liking posts when I see like a blog post, and now I'm trying to remember to do that when I watch a YouTube video that I enjoyed for whatever reason, whatever kind of video it is, to just throw it a like even if I don't have a comment. So I'm doing a little bit better with this. I'm happy with the interactions I've been having and that I'm feeling more comfortable having interactions. So now let's get into specific books, the good, the bad, the yet to be read. I wanted to pick the best book of the year so far, but I could not narrow it down to one book. I couldn't even narrow it down to a top 3, so what I've decided to do is pick my favorite book from each month. Just pick one book from whatever I read that month. And I'm pretty happy with the choices I had. I feel like my favorite reads were spread out pretty evenly, which was nice. And I feel like these all kind of represent my reading taste and what I'm really into right now. So first up from January, my favorite read was The Lost World by Michael Crichton. Obviously an older book. I finally read Jurassic Park last year and loved it. I don't know what I was waiting for. Jurassic Park's my favorite movie. I don't know a lot about dinosaurs, but I like dinosaurs. And I really liked Michael Crichton's writing in the first book. Reading the sequel just gave me a bit more of that. It was really interesting, having seen the movies so many times, to see the original material, where it came from, where the story started, get back into that world. People on an island just trying to survive all these dinosaurs. The stakes are a little bit higher in this because the dinosaurs are just free roaming. I just really liked it. I'm really glad I finally read this. Then in February, it was Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. I thought this book was a lot of fun. I think it had a lot of music Easter eggs. I probably missed a ton of them, but I like that they're kind of there if you pick up on them, and if you don't, it doesn't take anything away from the story at all. I liked seeing this group of friends getting back together. I think that's always a really interesting dynamic to portray in a story. Having these older heroes who still have this strong bond with one another, but they've grown apart, their lives have changed significantly, and then they go on one last adventure. Stakes are pretty high, and I just thought this book was a lot of fun. In March, my favorite book was The Lies of the Ajungo by Moses Osiotomi. I loved this story. I have never been a big novella reader. I've been trying to read more of them this year, and this was just such a great story. I think it told a very full story with a very interesting world, and our character shows a lot of growth throughout it, but in such a small format. I think it really gave you the information you needed to make it feel like a complete full world with interesting characters without over explaining anything. I think that's a really impressive thing to be able to do in writing, to very succinctly say everything you need to say, everything the reader needs to know, without really dawdling and spending too much time on describing anything. From April, it was Infinity Gate by M.R. Carey. This is the first in a sci-fi series, very large world, kind of endlessly large. We have 3 main characters. We get to follow each of them at different points and see how they all come together. My only complaint about this was that the ending didn't give us a little bit more. It's kind of a how the group got together first book in the series, which isn't my favorite, but I thought this was very engaging, very interesting. I loved the writing. I liked getting to know all of the characters. I'm very interested to see where this story takes us next whenever the sequel comes out. In May, it was The Sword Defiant by Gareth Hanrahan. I loved this story. This has a lot of that morally gray characters. We follow Elf. This is another getting the band back together type of story. Our heroes have all gone their separate ways. They're in much more political roles now that they're the people who stopped the bad guy, and they're in positions of power, trying to run everything, but also that's not really what they signed up for. things have changed quite a bit. This new looming threat, there's a lot of morally gray things and conversations about, are the good guys really good? Are the bad guys really that bad? And where the overlap might be, kind of contemplating that good and evil aren't quite as black and white as you would expect them to be. And I think that was really interesting. I really liked this world, like that it felt like it had a very rich history, and there were so many characters that were all very unique and interesting, and I liked their dynamics with each other. And then in June, it was The Crane Husband by Kelly Barnhill. This is the first book I've read by Kelly Barnhill. She's been on my radar for a while, and I think this was a great introduction to her writing. I really loved this story. It covers some very heavy topics in a very interesting, bizarre way, but not in a way that I felt diminished any of the things that we were talking about, any of the themes that are happening in this story. And just seeing someone bring a 6-foot-tall crane home and how the children have to deal with the consequences of that. Kind of a heavy story, but a very interesting way to portray something like that and have those conversations. And I really enjoyed it. Definitely going to be reading more Kelly Barnhill in the future when I can fit it in. But I think this was a good introduction to her writing for me. I've read quite a few new releases this year. One new release that came out in the first half of the year that I have not read but I am most excited to read is Dragonfall by L.R. Lamb. I like dragons, I like thief characters, and this book has them both, so I think it sounds very interesting. It sounds like something I'm gonna like. Hopefully it is. I'm hopefully gonna get to it relatively soon, but I think that's the one that's come out this year of all the new releases that I haven't gotten to yet that I'm most excited to get to and the most hopeful that I will enjoy. As for the second half of the year, the book I'm most looking forward to coming out is Lights by Brenna Thumler. This is the third and final book in the Sheets series, which is a graphic novel series about a girl who has lost her mother and she's taken over making sure that the laundromat that her family owns is running so that her family can make money and stay afloat. She finds out that there is a ghost of a young boy who has been living in the laundromat and causing some problems for her unintentionally. They become friends and get to know each other. In the sequel, we add a third character to the mix and get to know her story. I read that at the beginning of the year. I absolutely loved that book. It's so sad. They cover some very heavy things with younger characters in a very approachable way. This third book is going to be about Wendell. We're finally going to get to know more about him and who he was, maybe what happened to him a bit more. So I'm very excited to see what these characters get up to, learn more about Wendell. Then my most disappointing read of the year so far was also my most recent DNF, and that was Kagan the Damned by Jonathan Mayberry. I was really looking forward to this. It really sounded like something I was going to love, and unfortunately the writing just didn't click for me. There's kind of a lot going on at the opening of the story, and I just didn't feel like I was too immersed in it or invested in a lot of the things that were going on. So that was pretty disappointing, but I've had a lot of really good reads this year, so I'm not too bummed about it. Just didn't work for me. But on a lighter note, the most surprising book that I read this year was The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. I've heard a lot of wonderful things about this series, about this book in particular, and I went into it expecting not to love it, and I am happy to say that I was wrong. I thought it was very engaging. It's a very atmospheric, magical fairy tale type of story. I read the entire trilogy this year already, so obviously I really enjoyed it, that I went right into the second and third books. And I just enjoyed this a lot more than I had expected to, and I'm very happy about that. So those are all my goals. Those are all the books I want to talk about today. Looking forward to reading even more great books in the second half of the year, both new releases and things that have just been sitting on my TBR for probably too long. So that's all for me today. Let me know how you're doing on your reading this year, what the best book you've read this year is. I'd love to hear that. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you next time. Bye.